Hi, this is Sean, and I'm going to explain inversion. You can follow along in your course book on page 175, and later there's an activity on page 13. Okay, let's begin. Inversion. We look for inversion in speakers of advanced English because it's quite sophisticated. We use it in special situations, and it incorporates expressions like hardly, little, never, no sooner, seldom, under no circumstances, on no account, and so on. And we put these expressions at the beginning of a sentence. And when we do this, it creates emphasis and furthermore, an inversion of the auxiliary in the subject. This means that it's like a question. The verb is inverted. The subject and the verb are both inverted. And the negative word is what provokes it, what triggers this inversion. Let's look at some examples. Under no circumstances should you share your password with others. At no time did she consider any other possibility. You'll notice in this first example that the modal should comes before you. So we've taken and we've transposed you and should. In the next one here, however, we have the auxiliary do, and that's necessary because the verb consider cannot come before the subject, she. So if you have a verb that can't come before the subject, that is, it is not a modal, it is not the verb to be, or the verb to have, you need to use the auxiliary do. Not until she had failed to make contact for over 24 hours did they contact the police. Notice this is a very long adverbial phrase. Then we have the auxiliary do, the subject they, and then the verb contact. So these are examples with negative adverbs or adverbial expressions. We have another type of expression that triggers inversion, and the book calls it restrictive words and expressions, but I like to call them limiting words and expressions. These are in particular hardly, little, seldom, never, or not only. Hardly had I arrived in Paris when I received a call telling me I had to return home urgently. No sooner had I sat down to have a cup of tea than the telephone rang. So these phrases would probably be in a literary environment, perhaps in an article, a story, or anywhere you would like to have dramatic effect. I think in this one in particular comes from a music review. Seldom have I felt so moved by a piece of orchestral music. Little did I know that they were planning to replace me as project leader. Never had his wife looked more beautiful. Only when I saw him again did I realize just how good a friend he had been. Notice here we have the auxiliary do again, because the verb realize cannot come before the subject. And we have the limiter only when. Not only have you missed several classes, and here we have the present perfect. The auxiliary have can come before you, and so therefore we have not only have you missed several classes, you have also failed to submit all the written work. Now let's be a little more visual for a moment. I have here three different situations. In the first one, the man is looking very dissatisfied. He's at a restaurant and I think they've spilled some soup on him or some wine. And he's in an outrage and he says, very eloquently I might add, "Never in my life have I had such poor service." The next situation is probably talking about this prehistoric event of finding the wheel. And a scientist says, little did he imagine what his discovery would ultimately lead him to. The third situation probably comes out of this recipe book, and it says here, on no account should you add more than a pinch of salt to the mixture. So our negative word in the first one was never. Here in the next one, little, and finally on no account, and it has inversion. Okay, let's do 5 examples and then you're on your way. I've never in my life never in my whole life tasted anything so awful. Well, we have never, and we can even say never in my whole life. So, never in my whole life have I tasted anything so awful, or never have I in my whole life tasted anything so awful. In B, where is the expression? It's here, under any circumstances. However, we need to incorporate this no and put it here, this not, and put it here with any, and it becomes no. So we have under no circumstances, are credit cards accepted? Our phrase here is until much later. Again, we have to take the not from here. Not until much later did we find out about his research. Here we have when we arrived back at the lab, combined with only. Only when we arrived back at the lab did we realize what had happened. And our last example employs this lovely pair, not only and but also. Not only did we lose our passports, but also our money. Now you can go back to the front of your book, page 13, and we'll do an example here for you. The city has seldom been in greater need of energy-efficient public transport than it is today. We're going to start off with the word seldom. Rarely, basically, right? Seldom has the city been in greater need of energy-efficient transport than it is today. And now you're ready to do the rest. So please do the rest of them, 2 through 8.